In this video, I would like to demonstrate and discuss 10 watches, or we have 8 complete watches and 2 movements, and this is by a early 20th century watch manufacturer that was located in Chaux de Fonds, Switzerland, and these are predominantly ladies' watches. Perhaps also children's watches, as these are very small miniature pieces, and these pieces are all the result of a watchmaking dynasty that originated in La Locla in Switzerland. However, in the situation with watch production and competition in world markets that began in the last quarter of the 19th century, saw watch production slowly shift from La Locla to La Chaux de Fonds, and by the 1880s we find immense pressure on Swiss manufacturers, watch manufacturers, and they were competing against large-scale American mass production, which began to really hit home, and Swiss watch production began to collapse. However, they did reorganize, and we do find in this period, particularly the late 1880s and right into the 1890s, many of the companies that were still viable were relocating to La Chaux de Fonds, and their production was becoming much more large scale. And now we are generally discussing here Montandon watch producers. What happened with their production is a microcosm of the entire picture, what was going on in the other companies. However, after the departure of Montandon Frères, who are the flagship Montandon watch producer in Switzerland, now this company liquidated by around 1888 in Locla. Now their brand still did continue up until around 1911, and we had the Paris watch sales were happening, and they did continue fabrication in Geneva. Yet this was all outsourced, and it was only under the Montandon name. Now this watchmaker, this particular one that I'm speaking about, they actually were very close to Montandon Frères Locla, and in fact we do find that their production was actually geared towards portions of what Montandon Frères was doing. And so when Montandon Frères closed shop, we do find briefly a Montandon Frères in La Chaux de Fonds mentioned, and this may have been some sort of an attempt by the relatives who were operating there to resurrect the brand under them. However, after 1 year's mention in the Davoine almanacs, we see that this disappears. However, the watch fabricators that were there continued under their own names. But however, this what we're looking at today is actually a continuation of this watch dynasty. Now, the Montandon Frères Locla had been mainly the Montandon Blaise Leon branch, and whereas here we have their close cousins. This is Montandon de la Chaux de Fonds genealogical branch, and these were mainly the children of Jules Frederick Montandon, who was in collaboration with Montandon Frères, and we do see that his children, and this we have Paul Montandon Nagy, Alphonse Montandon-Bandelier, Jules Montandon, Jules Montandon Jacquard, and their half-brothers. These were brothers by another mother with Jules Frederick, and this is Jules Albert and Ariste. Jules Albert would be manufacturing under the name of Albert Montandon, and Ariste Montandon Calam, he was a fabricator of cadran or watch dials. And Arist Montandon, we do see that he was very active in this watch dial fabrication, and in particular also with photographic techniques for placing photographs on the watch dial, but he was very specialized in only this. Now, there is a little bit of a interesting situation. It should be mentioned before we discuss these 20th century watches. Now, this very end period after the collapse of Montandon Furs in the 1890s, we see many Jules Montandon chronographs and very highly expensive pieces, very precise. Now, these appear to have been something that this marking of this Jules Montandon law clock continued at this time, even though Jules Frederick had already passed on. And this may have been a product that the children were making under his name, as this was very established and known commodity. So this cannot be ruled out, but this seems very likely, even though we have Jules Albert, who had a factory in Chaux de Fonds up until 1899. And this does seem like this is related to their production. However, these watches, these are all a product of Alphonse Montandon-Bandelier, and he lived from 1861 to 1929. And Alphonse was a watch manufacturer. We do find him in Davoine almanacs, and even in the 1907 Kelly's almanac, we find him under watch manufacturers and exporters. And he was not only manufacturing watches, however, watch parts. And this would include movements as well. And now, the one thing that all of these watches have in common is that their movements are signed A. Montandon and either Swiss or Switzerland. So this sort of the previous style of signing Locle or Geneva, etc., this is slowly giving way to this Swiss or Switzerland, more generic location signing. But it is interesting that when these types of watches appear for sale, generally we see A. Montandon on the movement, and it is very poorly comprehended by experts in the watchmaking community. It appears the people who are selling them, at least, they all want to attribute these to Albert. These are not. This is not Albert Montandon. This is Alphonse Montandon-Bandelier, and this is very clear. We find him in this entire period. We have the patents on bracelets, etc., with the datings that we can clearly make this and peg this to Alphonse. So this is very poorly understood, and this is something that when we see Montandon, the seller immediately wants to claim it's Albert, but they have really no idea that who is behind this. So, but let us look at these. Now, we have these four golden, and these are very small movements, but these four golden pieces, and they share many similar characteristics. However, we do see in some cases, now we have the bracelets here, and then some of the bracelets have gone missing, but we have leather bracelets, which is very interesting because at this period, wristwatches were coming into vogue, and this is just before World War One. And World War One would see the trench watches appear. This was the pocket watch would slowly disappear because it wasn't as practical for the trenches. So we see various different solutions for holding the watch, and we see many patents involved with this technology. But these pieces are circa 1909, 1912, in this area, before, just prior to World War One. And this is very fascinating, how this evolution from pocket watches to wristwatches did come about. Now we do see also these very interesting, and these are also the Albert Montandon-Bandelier. We do see these very beautiful, this would see so-called Art Deco style watches. And these were right around 1920 and 1925. We do find patent information on some of the bracelets here, and it's obviously it's not visible. I can provide close-ups, but this much of the information on the bracelets is very good, very helpful in identifying, dating this watch as to when it could be, when this was fabricated, that it couldn't have been fabricated before the patent for this technology. So, but this gives us around the early to mid 20s for some of these pieces, and this is very fascinating. And this is another anchor to Alphonse, who was in business through this period. Now, it should be mentioned that there are several other Montandons. Of course, there was Albert Montandon. This is Jules Albert. Now, he had sold his watch factory in 1899, and there's no indication that he continued watch fabrication after 1900. He appears to have been living very comfortably, and he may have been totally independent of this. He may have been doing other forms of business. This is not exactly clear, but we do have this extra information of the patents. So I would like to show and I will provide close-ups of these, but we can see, for example, this is very interesting. This around World War I, this piece, but this could be as late as 1925, 1927, but we see that this piece has the circular movement, yet the case would have been this shape. Now these shapes here, this type of movement, this is referred to as a baguette, and we turn around, we see very beautifully decorated. This is a baguette movement, and we see our watchmaker signing. And once again, I will provide more clear close-ups of this, but this is very, very common for this period. But these watches, and these, we find these mainly as ladies' watches in gold and in silver, and in some cases white gold. But these are very interesting pieces, and they're quite beautiful when you look at the designs that these artisans had came up with. But these were very standard. We see other makers making very similar looking products, and indeed these watches appear to be sold for the American markets, and indeed it may be so, as these cases are all by American, a variety of American case makers. For example, Elgin Giant, Star Watch Company, or Watch Case Company, Star Watch Case Company, and this type of thing. So that indeed these may be specifically movements that were produced for the American market and shipped to America, where they were housed in these cases. So this would have been also a possibility, as we do find that now Alphonse does have a poinçon, a maker's mark, and this was established in 1894. Now, had these been watches specifically from beginning to end made by him, we would expect his poinçon to be inside. And on these, at least, they are not, and therefore it is very likely that these were watch parts, the movements which he sent to the American market, and they were then finished. Now, many American producers did have manufacturing sites for various different productions in Switzerland, and it is also possible that these were cased still in Switzerland and sent as whole watches, but that he was collaborating with the American firms that had set up shop in Switzerland. So, but these are very interesting. This is a very small, this is the smallest I've seen of these pieces. Now this piece, we can see here that the dial has its own signature, and this would have been a subcontractor, but these are very small pieces. This could have been easily a child's watch. So, and this is the case for that piece. Goes like so. Once again, for over 100 years old, this piece is very interesting technology, and even the clasps, the hooking mechanism, is quite interesting to see how these were. This problem was resolved because wristwatches, this had been something of a novelty, and they became so popular that they essentially replaced the pocket watch. So I do hope that this sheds a little light on this early 20th century watchmaker. So there is a lot of confusion on people when they see a Montandon. They immediately assume Albert. This is Alphonse. Now there was an Alcide Montandon. Alcide Montandon was the brother of Ulysse Montandon Robert. Now he was making various different fine tunings for watches. He was a so-called repasseur, so-called ironer. Repassage, this is this type of finalized work for getting the watch into order and adjusting it in the case, etc., making sure that it is totally viable. Now he was doing also tirage. What this tirage is the drawing of the so-called anchor as it hits against the tooth inside the escapement. Now this is highly technical and finite, or very fine, I should say, work, very specialized, and this he was very knowledgeable about these finishing sort of processes, but we don't expect him to have been a manufacturer because he's not listed in any of the catalogs at the time or almanacs as a watch manufacturer. So this was just more or less a repair shop. Now we have Alcide. He is ruled out. Albert was already out of the watch business, as per all of the information that we find in the same sources. There is a jeweler in Geneva, also like Alcide, also in Geneva. This August, he would have been too young. He appears to have been born around 1880, and he doesn't seem to have been anything other than just a jeweler. And he also is not mentioned in any capacity as a watch manufacturer. So once again, we do find that this Alphonse is the only possible Montandon who was manufacturing between this 1900 to 1930. Now, Alphonse's children, he did have two children that both went into watchmaking, and one was Leopold, who, when Alphonse himself died in 1929, his son Leopold continued the business, and the business continued to about 1932 when it finally liquidated. So that Leopold was running the business, and then there was another son. Now the other son, Arnold, he also would go into the watch business more along the lines of actually bracelets and cases and this type of thing. So he was quite, he did a lot of other watch processes, dorage, I believe, and this type of thing. So once again, these are all ancillary services around watches, but not the actual watch production. So we do know pretty much 99.999% that Montandon, Swiss or Switzerland, this period, this is definitely Alphonse Montandon-Bandelier. Bandelier was his marriage alliance. He was married to Louise Bandelier, and This is also another illustrious name in Swiss watchmaking at this time. So I hope this information was useful. I hope these watches are of interest to people, because this is an interesting, a bit of almost archaeology of watch technology, and it is fascinating to study these objects and to find out the stories behind them. And I hope this was helpful, and I wish you a nice day.